With the transition from internal combustion engine cars to EVs, with the change in paradigm from large standalone stores outside of the city limits to now a variety of different retail models and formats, the retailer business itself is changing quite dramatically. I'm here in conversation with Dirk Adelmann from Smart Europe and Andrea Sorrenti from MSX International. And in this part of the conversation, we're going to delve deeper into what these changes mean to the business model of an NSC and what these changes mean for the business model of a dealer. So, Dirk, let me start with you, and I'm going to ask the same question to both of you this time. But in our research, we find, give or take, about 80% dealers are extremely concerned about what the next 3 to 5 years will bring. They see a lot of threats, they see a lot of challenges. Of course, there are retailers that see huge opportunity as well. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that are facing dealers and retailers today?
The biggest challenge in my eyes is to react to the change in profit pools that you have in a dealership. Usually that's new car, used car, after sales, a little bit digital services, and a lot on finance and insurance business. So those 5 pools will, in my opinion, change their importance dramatically in the next couple of years with the introduction of direct sales, but also with the introduction of battery electric vehicles. So the after-sales business, which, is oil-rich, so to say, still will shrink. And that is a forecast. Obviously, that is not my forecast. This is industry-wide agreement, I think. Common sense, it will shrink. So you need to find other profit pools, or you need to enhance profit pools that are existing. So there is a way out. Many retailers are concentrating now very much on used car business, which was a little bit underdeveloped in certain areas. But also not to underestimate digital services. Or let's say totally different models, like they have their own subscription or their own rental business now setting up. We are seeing quite a significant change. Some embrace it, but most of them are worried, as usual with any change. Yeah.
And Andrea, from your perspective, how do you see these? What are the 2 or 3 biggest opportunities, 2 or 3 biggest challenges for a dealer?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Dirk's comments, obviously, about service. Although I do see the possibility for dealers to leverage service as well as an area of opportunity. We're seeing, for example, mobile service being a major topic. Customers, because they're used to a more frictionless experience, they don't want to go into the dealership, make an appointment, and wait there when their car is serviced. So even if we're talking about light maintenance, so tires, and we know that tires with EVs are certainly an important topic, but tires and any fast-moving parts, they will still be a business. And with mobile service, it could be an interesting value proposition for the dealers. But there's other areas as well. You think about charging, you think about all these mobility services. For sure, one thing that dealers will have to do is become themselves more agile, because even the used car market that Dirk was mentioning is subject to a lot of changes recently, right? We've seen some strong price variations in some of these models, and how do you respond as a dealer when you're relying on the used car market so much? So they will have to become extremely agile and capable of shifting their focus on the various areas that generate the most profit over time.
So if I were to pick up on some of the main themes emerging from there, I think, Dirk, the changing composition of the profit pool for a dealer or retailer is probably one of the biggest trends that we've got to be watching out for. The traditional, if I were to oversimplify, the traditional composition of that profit pool is that after sales, so service, labor, parts, and finance and insurance contribute a majority of the profit and the margins for a dealer. Often new car sales are almost subsidized for profit in order to feed these 2 other sort of engines of profit within the dealership. Why do you see this changing? What is it about BEVs that you think will impact this profit pool in such a significant manner?
Number one, service intervals. Service intervals with ICE engines are defined by oil change and brake pad change. No oil and brake pads, if you have a proper recuperation system, also not so much affected anymore. We have the first competitors that advertise with we don't have service intervals on our BEV vehicles anymore. No? So that means you have less chances to get in contact with the customer. And it's not the service A, the service B that you cherish as a retailer, it's the customer contact. So you can upsell, you can cross-sell, you are in contact, you have another chance with the customer. And that slowly will go down. Yes, you can then obviously cater more customers because it's less vehicle traffic, but also the revenue. I mean, it's labor and parts includes very high margin parts like oil, which will be completely gone. So also the profit, even if you keep the same number of throughput, the profit will deteriorate. So after sales, I see under quite some pressure, really pressure.
I think about this quite a bit, and always the conclusion I come to is that the paradigm is changing quite dramatically. I mean, the way a dealer or a retailer would have thought 10 or 15 years back with an entirely ICE pool or park is very different to how a retailer must think. And there's also this constant tension between profit return, growth, and customer experience. You don't want to miss that balance and be start to seen as opportunistic or predatory, and that means you shoo your customers away and deliver a customer experience that is suboptimal. But at the same time, in order to deliver a good customer experience, you've got to be profitable and you've got to generate a good return for your investors. So Andrea, from your perspective, how do you see some of this playing out? What if there was a retailer watching our conversation today, what would your advice to them be in terms of achieving this balance between profit return and customer experience, right?
Yeah, so I think customers are willing to pay for an exceptional experience. That's the number one point, right? If you compare an operation that's just doing oil changes at and I'll use the U.S. numbers at $20 an hour, they're not going to be making a lot of money. But if I offer an exceptional experience where the customer is being serviced and at home, or somebody goes to pick up their vehicle, gives them a courtesy car, the customer is willing to pay a lot more. There's companies out there that even very successfully do detailing in remotely, right? And dealers are going to have to become creative in that respect. The asset that we have, and when I say we, I talk about the industry in general, I talk about the OEMs and the dealers, is that these are trusted brands by customers. And that's an incredible asset to start with. So there's been a lot of talk of vehicles as a wallet or ways to pay directly through your engagement with the OEM or the dealer. Those are things that we really need to think about, as well as capitalizing on opportunities that are already out there. They're visible, but not always are we taking advantage of, like charging. If I buy an EV today in some areas and with some brands, there's agreements and I can get my charger installed relatively easily. But there's also plenty of unsuccessful experiences in that respect, where as a customer, you have to wait months to get your charger installed. You don't know where to get it. You don't have a number of providers that are there. As a dealer, I would say you have to make sure that your offering is well-rounded and that you're covering all angles. And again, that you're very agile and capable of focusing on the area that allows you to generate the most profit.
I relate to what you're saying quite well, because this is our ethos at MSX's distinction between selling goods and services versus selling value. And when you say customers are willing to pay for an exceptional experience, that's the value that you're providing to them or exposing them to, which they then have a desire to experience and hence are willing to pay more. So Dirk, from your perspective, as Smart, what are some of those vectors on which you think customers can be sold value rather than another good or service? What are some of those drivers of value?
I mean, we started as an idea of sustainable mobility, not a car. Anybody can do a car. It's metal and so a bit more complex than that, but in essence. No? But if you provide a mobility solution or a mobility experience, and that starts with the customer purchase process, that starts with the online journey. Is it integrated? Yes, no. What is your brand experience? That has to be translated into offline, into the retailers, that they speak with the same mindset, that they have the same approach towards the customer. If that experience is perfect, is fitting to the brand, then the product is, yes, and don't get me wrong, it's a nice to have. It's still very, very much important in the whole process. But it's not everything. You're also selling a value. You are selling a brand experience. You're selling also kind of a status. You used to be, and I hope that is still the case, you used to be dressed well in a smart. Independent if you go to, I don't know, a soccer game or a football game, or if you go to the opera. You're never wrong in a smart because it expresses a certain statement. We always thrive for a better future, for a sustainable future, for changing the industry towards a better tomorrow. And I know those are big words, but this is what's behind the brand. And if that brand promise is revived and put with life again and again and again, you can differentiate yourself. If the retailers are also in the boat with you, then it works.
I think that's fascinating.
Much more than a product.
I agree. And to reinforce those two concepts, right? The concept of value. If you think about the most valuable companies in the world, you think about Apple, they're not competing on price, they're competing on value, right? But also, on the comment that Dirk was making, I believe that's so true. We've been talking in the industry about the software-defined vehicle for so long. I think what we should be talking about is a software-defined customer experience, right? It's more than just the vehicle. It's about your experience as an owner of that vehicle.
And the software-defined customer experience presumably would be a lot more personalized, a lot more tailored, a lot more fluid and dynamic, rather than something that is quite rigid in terms of the journey that the phases that the customer must
it's the combination of that experience that you have driving the vehicle, interacting with the vehicle, which is, today is possible as users are using one function more than the other or adjusting it, like you mentioned earlier. The vehicle can be updated based on your needs. That's your experience in the vehicle, but there's also this entire framework of experience with those dealerships that you're interacting with the online experience and everything that is happening around your interaction with the brand.
We've spoken a lot, gentlemen, about revenue, profit, value. Let's talk about cost as well, because from a retailer's perspective, and arguably an extremely important driver of profitability as well. So from a cost structure perspective, given that for dealers, retailers, manpower cost, float plan interest, rents, these are sort of the three big chunks of costs. How do you see these changing with this new technology and new family of electric vehicles? How do you see this changing with a move to different kinds of distribution models where the dealer may not need to invest in float plan to hold all of this large inventory? How do you see the cost structure evolving?
You answered it partially yourself. The business model change has a huge impact because by far the highest financing effort, if you're an established retailer and you own the building, is your inventory. And if the inventory is kept by the OEM, then you have free cash. And with that free cash, obviously, you can also start innovative business models like your own subscription models, like investing into customer experience on the ground. And I think the change of business model will help our retailers to also then focus on more profitable areas outside, let's say, after sales, where it goes down a bit due to the change in the product from ICE to BEV. So I think they can compensate each other very nicely, in my opinion.
Andrea, you said you live in America. Do you see this differently in that part of the world versus Europe versus China? Do you see the cost structure being more resistant to change in the US, which is a 100-year-old auto retail industry?
I think the trends are going to be very similar. There is going to be probably a delay in the adoption of some of these newer models. but ultimately, again, it's the customer that's going to drive the change. What I see as a potential consequence of moving towards hybrid and then agency models and direct to sales is that as the complexity on the dealer side is reduced because they have less complexity in service and less complexity also in regulatory requirements and the interaction with the various players on the sales side, it might make the relationship between the OEMs and the dealer a little more volatile, and it might make competition even more challenging. So if I see that with the OEM next door, I'm making more money, it's not going to take me as much to switch over than it does today.
And we see that in Europe already, so that free cash can be used to improve customer service. It can also be used to take another brand in there.
Dirk, it is very clear to me from our conversation so far that the trajectory leading to the future is very different from the trajectory that got us here from the past. Is this a conversation you have frequently with your network partners, your retailers, your dealers, your distributors? And what sort of, how do you approach this? What sort of investments are you making with them? Not just financial, but strategically thinking, 5, 7, 10 years into the future. How are you helping them prepare for this future that is coming?
I think smart, and also our German mother, we are famous for not pushing something over to the retail. We sit down and discuss. And it's almost like a UK debate discussion that we have. It takes ages, but it's worth it because then we come up with a contract that is on eye level and a contract that basically after 2 years you can readjust, and it's okay to readjust. And those discussions we have quarterly, not only on contracts but also on regular business updates. But we are willing to change also our contractual relationship if it helps us and if it helps the retailers improve our service quality towards the customer or improve our cost position inside. So those discussions we have on eye level, as I said, and this is, in my opinion, the only way forward, at least the only way I know where I grew up. Other brands do it differently. Tricky, but also possible. We have made excellent experience in doing it on eye level, even if it means that not everybody in the network follows, but the ones remaining, they are fully with you. And if it means a network adjustment in terms of selecting few investors for the path forward and, okay, let the others go if they want to, it's okay. It's okay. You don't need everybody to move.
One of the things I read a long time back, but it has stayed with me since, is that for successful brands, their network is not just their partner, but it is their extended enterprise. So it is like a part of you. And I think I must commend you on the fact that you engage with your retailers and your distributors so well as equals with respect. I think that is a hallmark of brands that operate successfully in this industry.
Sometimes it hurts because there is a lot of trust now built in the last couple of years, and there is a lot of also honest feedback and criticism, which helps us, but it sometimes also hurts both ways.
Yes. No, and I'm sure there is a huge degree of humility that is needed in order to accept some of that feedback, acknowledge it, and work on it. And I'm sure this is something that you have learned from your experience as well. Andrea, on a slightly different track, but still related to dealers and their future, we are seeing an unprecedented level of M&A activity in the automotive retail space. I was reading somewhere that last year 2023 has been a record year when it comes to M&A transactions in the automotive retail space, so i.e. dealers, retailers. Do you see this trend gathering more momentum going forward? And if so, why do you feel this way?
I expect that it will continue for a while. So first of all, the trend that we've seen is a consequence of our recent history, right? So dealers for a few years during COVID and right after COVID became more profitable than before. That allowed them to have more cash at hand for these transactions. At the same time, the advent of EVs and some of the changes in the distribution models created a lot of uncertainty for some of the smaller dealers who were thinking, do I keep on fighting this battle, or do I give up to this bigger guy who's coming in and offering me some money? And so I think that led to this spike. I think the trend is now continuing for other reasons, for real business reasons. And that's because you need economies of scale to be successful. We know the margins are what they are in the dealership process, in running a dealership. And inventory management is really important as well. So these larger dealers have access to a lot of inventory, and they've become extremely successful in leveraging that inventory to increase sales. So I do see that continuing, probably not at the same pace as we experienced in the last couple of years, but I think it probably will continue over the next few.
As an OEM, Dirk, do you see that favorably? Do you see that as helping you, or do you see it change the sort of power balance in some ways that makes or would make a typical OEM feel a bit threatened or concerned?
In some ways, it definitely changes the balance of power. If you're not cautious as well, I mean, it's still about also you agreeing to who buys your own retail, for example, or who is getting this market territory from the other one. So you have some influence in steering that, and I would highly recommend to steer that. But I think it's unavoidable, because if you look at the US or the UK, there you have the very professional big dealer groups operating superbly on a cost level that is much lower than the rest of Europe over here. So it's unavoidable because that cost level gives you such a high competitive advantage that you will simply outpace the others. So that will come. You have to ideally steer it in the direction that you still can talk on eye level and are not basically overpowered by one retail group in 3-4 countries that is dictating terms, for example, when you want to change a business model.
Amazing. I like to wrap up all my conversations with a little bit of crystal ball gazing. So I'm going to ask both of you to gaze into the imaginary crystal ball and look 3 to 5 years ahead. What are 3 big trends you see emerging? What are your top 3 predictions for the future of this space with a 3 to 5 year horizon?
The first one I see is somewhat connected to some of the topics that we were covering, and it's connected to data. The data is there, it's available, it's coming from the connected vehicle and from the interactions with customers. What we're layering on top of that is now new capabilities in terms of interpreting that data and leveraging it to anticipate customer needs and address those customer needs very specifically. So I think AI is going to play a role in the consumer interaction, and it's probably going to help manufacturers and dealers making sure that they are ensuring that experience is seamless and successful. I would stick to that as trend number 1. I'll let Dirk cover his top.
I'm in between 2 trends. One is consolidation. So not only on retail level, I also forecast that for OEMs. Way too many, also way too much production capacity at the moment worldwide. So there will be consolidation in the next couple of years. And secondly, I leave that to you, and then I do mine afterwards.
What I find interesting about consolidation is that there are so many routes to consolidation. It's not the traditional one OEM acquiring the other, one brand acquiring the other. We saw yesterday Volkswagen and Rivian signed a very interesting partnership. And so there are multiple routes to consolidate. There are various ways of achieving that consolidation and partnership and collaboration. So I find that really interesting, Andrea.
So I think the second one is, again, something that we've already somewhat discussed in this conversation is, we tend to simplify, and as human beings, we like to refer to one model and one solution to a problem. I don't think there's going to be one solution to a problem. I think what we will see is a multitude of different models. And again, what that will require is a lot of flexibility on all ends to make sure that these things work. Because when you have to deal with the traditional dealers, with the hybrid model, with the agency model, and direct to consumer at the same time, you need a lot of flexibility. So OEMs will have a hard time. It's going to be a challenge to make sure that happens.
Dirk?
Yeah, I love what you said earlier on about Software-defined customer journey. This will be game changer. The first one implementing this one, including the car operating system, so self-developed or procured from the bigger players, non-automotive players that are going into that space. The one that is connecting the dots first has a huge advantage, in my opinion, and that is not to be underestimated. It will not take 5 years. It will be 2-3 years, and then we have, I think, a breakthrough.
And Andrea, your last one.
My last point is related to talent, and it's somewhat connected to what we do at MSX. The changes in the industry are going to require flexibility not only on behalf of the organizations, but also on behalf of the people that are part of those organizations. And developing that talent both within the dealerships and within the OEMs is going to be of the essence. We have the tools. We will have the tools to do that. Technology is going to help us greatly as we go through that. But I think that's, the focus on talent is going to be another huge topic for the industry.
And Dirk, your final prediction?
I would add on to this. What we have learned in the last 5 years is if you don't exchange the perspective, so if you don't move from a wholesale organization to a retailer and back, from a country level to headquarter level and back, you lose out. And this is managing talent, developing, but also really managing talent, making sure that this interaction takes place and you don't end up in silos on the different wholesale levels. In a direct sales model is, for me, crucial.
Amazing.
Crucial.
Amazing. Gentlemen, thank you so much for an enlightening, enriching, very wise conversation. Really appreciate your presence here today. It has been a joy speaking to you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What a time to be alive in this industry. There is so much change coming. Some of it is already here, but there's more coming. Immense opportunities and challenges. The brave shall succeed. Stay tuned for more on this series. Thank you for joining us today.